Hi everybody, it's Megan, and this is our last speech of the semester. In this week's topic, we are talking about 5 categories of news events that happen on our birthdays. And so, I was born December 6, 1988. It was a Tuesday. I was born on Mather Air Force Base in Sacramento, California. And for world news, I will use my notes. Transplanted Nepalese rhinos breed. And this was a New York Times article. I actually used New York Times articles for all of my events. And so there were 13 rhinos that had been relocated from the Chitwan Sanctuary to the Bardia Reserve in Nepal. And they were relocating rhinos to try to spread them apart so that one epidemic can't completely wipe out the endangered species. And so not too long, so they were relocated in 1986, and in 1988 they had their first baby rhino, and they weren't expecting baby so soon. And so for an update, since 1986 there were a total of 87 rhinos that had been relocated to the Bardia Reserve in Nepal. And as of 2019, only 22 of those 87 survived today. Great majority of them were believed to be killed off by poachers, and the rest by natural causes. As far as national news, Hart fundraiser sentenced for making illegal donations. Now, Gary Hart was campaigning for, he had a presidential campaign going, and George Stuart Carl Jr. Was his fundraiser. And so what George was doing was he had donated roughly about $200,000 to Hart's campaigns, both in 84 and in 88 in total, through employees of his company, and he paid them off for doing it. And then so Gary Hart had a 3-year suspended sentence and a $60,000 fine by the federal district court judge in LA. And George Stuart Carl Jr. he pleaded guilty in August. And part of his plea deal was that he couldn't go to prison, so he was sentenced to 6 years of probation and had to pay a $350,000 fine. Now, I don't really have an update on Hart, but I do have an update on George. He had fought cancer for about 2 years, and he ended up passing away 4 years after he pleaded guilty, and he passed away from melanoma. For state and local news, I wasn't entirely sure where, so I kind of went with the state local from where I was born, which was California. So 2 geologic faults were found in the LA area. So geologists discovered that there were 2 faults. They were about 6 to 10 miles below the surface of LA, the metropolitan area. And they say that this Don Anderson, the director of seismology laboratory at the California Institute of Technology, said that this is a double risk of earthquakes in the area that could cause some serious damage. And so in this article, it mentions that there are two types of faults. There are thrust faults, which are slabs of compressed rock, and they move vertically past one another. And strike-slip faults. Yes, strike-slip faults are large sections of the Earth's crust called plates, and they scrape past one another in a horizontal direction. Now, the San Andreas Fault is a strike-slip fault, and it's much larger than the two thrust faults that they had discovered. And so the San Andreas Fault had 60% probability of creating a devastating earthquake to the Southern California within the next 30 years. And so the San Andreas Fault is estimated to have one of these major earthquakes every 160 years. And so because earthquakes hadn't started becoming recorded until the early 1800s, it makes it kind of hard to determine some of these earthquakes and estimate when they're going to happen. But the thrust faults, so the ones that they discovered below LA, were thrust faults, and so those are estimated to go off about once every 500 to 1,000 years. And so because it hasn't been that long since we started recording these, they can't predict when those will happen. So as far as updating, I couldn't necessarily find if they named those faults, but so the San Andreas Fault has not actually had the catastrophic earthquake that they were estimating that would happen. And for entertainment, actor is in stable condition. So 44-year-old Gary Busey was campaigning against helmet laws that were trying to be passed in California. And so Sunday, now remember I was born on Tuesday, so Sunday he had been in a motorcycle accident and he hit his head and he had to have surgery done to remove blood clots from his brain. And so at first he was still anti-helmet. He came through. At first he was still anti-helmet, but a few years later he changed his mind and is now pro-helmet and very big on the safety. And for sports, I went with Holyfield is aiming to take a shot at Tyson. So Evander Holyfield, at 26 years old, he was a cruiserweight champion. And so he started training and dieting to become a heavyweight champion. He increased his training to 3 times a week with less focus on cardio and more focus on heavier weights. And he also increased the number of meals that he had per day. He was eating only twice a day then he started eating 4 to 5 times a day. And so his goal was to fight Tyson. His first heavyweight fight was July 16th in Nevada against James Tillis. And that fight stopped after 5 rounds, and Holyfield won. So then, update, Holyfield and Tyson have fought twice. The first fight was in November of 1996. Holyfield won after 11 rounds with a technical knockout. And then they also had a rematch in 97 where Tyson was disqualified for biting part of Holyfield's ear off. Ugh. But so those are the news events on the day that I was born. And I hope you have a nice day. Enjoy your summer. Bye.